By the time anyone really saw the horse, the auction day was already in full motion. The trucks had arrived before sunrise. Engines shook the ground, trailers rattled with hooves and metal. Dust floated in the air like a second skin. Inside the long barn, bright lamps burned hot over the ring. Numbers, lot tags, wristbands, tickets, consignment sheets, voices layered on top of each other. The fast chant of the auctioneer rolled over everything like a drum beat. Outside the main door, in a strip of shade, between the loading pens and the gravel parking lot, one bay gelding stood alone. He was not tied. No lead rope on the post, no knot on the rail. Just a plain bay horse, dark brown coat, black mane that needed brushing. One white sock on a back leg. He faced the open end of the alley, the side where the trucks came in and left again, as if he was waiting for something beyond the dust. Handlers hurried past him with other horses. Nervous ones swung their heads. Some reared at the smell of sweat and fear. Calves bawled from a pen. A mare struck the gate with a hoof. The bay gelding only flicked his ears and shifted his weight now and then. His eyes stayed steady, watching the opening of the barn. People assumed he belonged to someone else. At a place like this, there was always one extra horse, one animal tied in the wrong pen, one name written on the wrong line. Someone would claim him. Someone would slap a lot number on his hip. Someone would run him through the ring. No one did. In the office by the front door, a girl named Emma tried to ignore the sound of the sale. She was 17. The job behind the counter felt simple on paper. Take consignment forms, enter lot numbers, count fees, hand out buyer numbers, take payments, smile, say the same few phrases again and again. On the wall behind her, there was a calendar with a picture of a green field that did not smell like anything at all. It should have been routine. It did not feel that way. Emma had grown up around horses. She knew the smell of a good barn. Hay, leather, dust, sweat, sun. The auction barn added something sour on top of that. Panic, maybe, or decisions made too fast. She had promised herself she would not work the sale this year. Then, her uncle, who ran the place, had mentioned the stack of unpaid bills at home. The promise had collapsed. Every time the loudspeaker crackled and a new lot number echoed through the building, she felt a little twist inside. Each number meant a life rolling across the concrete one more time, whether anyone in the stands understood that or not. She lasted 2 hours before she needed air. When she stepped out the side door, she saw the horse. He stood, in the shade, close enough that she could see the old scar on his knee, a thin white line in the dark hair. Up close, he looked like he had been useful for a long time. Not a show horse, not a baby. Just the kind of animal that holds up someone's everyday life without anyone writing his name down anywhere. He turned his head when she came closer. His ears went forward, then relaxed. His eyes were dark and clear. No dullness, no glassy fear. Just a quiet, direct focus. Emma noticed the lack of writing on his hip. No chalk number, no tag, nothing. For a moment she felt something like a question come from him, not in words, just in the weight of his gaze. She reached out and laid a hand on his neck. His coat was warm and dusty. Under her fingers, muscle shifted calmly. Someone yelled her name from inside the office. She pulled her hand back and went in. The bay gelding lifted his head and turned it toward the barn door. Inside, the auction rolled on. Lots came and went. Some sold too cheap. Some went higher than they deserved. It always felt that way, but today, The imbalance had an edge. The first lot that stuck in Emma's mind that day was a chestnut mare with a crooked blaze. On the consignment sheet, the seller had written a name by habit, a small name in simple letters. The auctioneer did not use it. He called her a mare, a trail horse, something easy, something that moved nice. The language of sales took the detail out of her life and turned it into phrases with numbers attached. From the office door, Emma saw the mare circle the ring with tense steps. The whites of the horse's eyes showed in the bright light. Sweat had already dried in patches on her neck. In the stands, a woman in a clean straw hat watched every step with the focused look of someone who had already argued with herself and lost. Emma recognized that expression. It belonged to small rescues, to people who arrived with a trailer that was already too full and a bank account that was already too empty. On the back row, a boy pressed himself against his mother's side. His face was blotchy, the way a face looks after a long cry that finally ran dry. The mother stared at the ring as if each second pulled something out of her. The bidding started. The numbers climbed in awkward jumps, not high by rich people's standards, but heavy enough for those who cared. Each small raise meant a tighter month for the rescue woman in the straw hat. At the rear wall, the buyer who always came for weight watched in silence behind dark glasses. Emma had seen him before. He rarely moved. A small nod could send a decent horse into a pipeline that did not care about names or old photographs or how straight a blaze was. On this lot, he made that nod, a cold, clean motion that said the mare had just become meat in his head. Then something strange happened. The rescue woman did not give up. That was not the strange part. Emma had seen that kind of stubbornness before. The strange part came from the buyer in glasses. He stopped. The bid was at a point where he normally would have pushed once more. The mare was heavy enough to be worth it. Instead, he lifted a hand slightly, then let it fall, as if he had heard an order no one else heard. The mare left the ring with the straw hat woman holding her lead rope and a shaking kind of relief in her shoulders. On paper, the sale looked normal. Money had changed hands. A horse had gone from one owner to another. No rules had been broken. In the air, though, there was a faint sense of misalignment, as if someone had nudged the numbers sideways. Outside, the bay gelding stamped one hoof and stilled again. The day moved on. More lots, more numbers. The barn filled with the thick smell of animals and people and fried food from the snack stand. Time started to blur. Someone else noticed the imbalance before Emma named it. His name was Lucas. He sat halfway up the bleachers with a clipboard on his knees. He made his living buying and selling, watching patterns, reading bodies and prices. Under normal conditions, an auction like this was his map. Today, the map kept shifting under his pencil. Good horses were slipping through cheap. Thin and nervous ones were jumping higher than they should. Quiet, sound geldings landed in the hands of people who never bid on plain brown horses. Buyers who always watched for low numbers sat on their hands when obvious deals rolled past them. It felt to Lucas like a current running against the usual flow. He did not believe in magic. He believed in information. So he checked his notes again. Same age, same height, same kind of feet. The numbers on the cards didn't explain the difference. The next hard moment came in the form of an old bay with a swayback and cloudy eyes. The sheet called him a grade gelding, used, likely, many miles behind him. To the auctioneer, he looked like a basic animal that should go quick and low. To the buyer in sunglasses, he looked like a clear option for his usual truck. To one thin man in a plaid shirt near the aisle, he looked like something else. The last piece of his father. The man's body language told the story without words. Tight hands, white knuckles around a bid card, a half-standing posture that said he wanted to run forward and at the same time wanted to disappear. Emma, watching from the office door, saw his eyes fixed on the old bay as if nothing else in the building existed. The bidding began. It did not climb high. Old horses, in that condition, rarely did. A base number settled in the space between the ring and the stands. The buyer in sunglasses marked his territory with a nod. In any other sale, that would have settled it. The man in plaid lifted his card anyway. The number in his head and the number in the ring did not match. Everyone around him seemed to feel it. Some faces turned toward him with annoyance, some with pity. The invisible rules of the place said that if you did not have enough, you stayed quiet. The rules shook. From the top row, an older woman with a cane added her voice. She did not speak loudly, but her presence had weight. She had known the man's father, and everyone knew she didn't waste breath on things that didn't matter. Her support for the old bay was simple. The horse had carried his share of life. He deserved a way out that didn't end in a steel chute. The auctioneer stood in the middle of this and felt a pressure he usually did not feel. Most days, his job was to turn hearts into numbers and numbers into a hammer drop. Today, for the first time in a long while, the direction of the numbers pushed back. He did something small, but very strange for that barn. He let the balance run the other way. The asking price stayed the same on paper. The seller still got his full amount. The barn still took its fee. But in the gaps between the rules, people in the stands began to peel off pieces of that total. A woman in the back row offered part of the difference. A man who had bought 3 cheap colts offered a little more. Someone who rarely spoke tossed in a small bill with an awkward shrug. Lucas, watching the shifting amounts, found himself adding his own sum almost before he decided to do it. It was not a chant. It was not a wave. It was a quiet series of small decisions that added up to a new shape. On the ledger on Emma's counter, the numbers lined up neatly. Sold at the higher figure. Balance covered. Buyer owes less than the full amount because the extra had come from the crowd. On the invisible chalkboard that lived in the air above the ring, something else had happened. For once, the bidding had flowed backward. Not down into the hands of the coldest buyer, but back toward someone who had come not for profit, but for a promise to the past. The old bay left the ring with the man in plaid, walking beside him slowly, one hand on his neck in a way that said this was not a new partnership, but an old one repaired. In the office, Emma's uncle was furious. The barn, in his mind, was a machine built on one direction of movement. Money went up when excitement went up. It never went down by kindness. The moment with the old bay felt to him like a crack in the foundation. He talked about precedent, about discipline, about how people would expect special treatment next time. Emma heard the anger. At the same time, she remembered something else. The sound in the barn, when the crowd had shifted from watching to taking part. It reminded her of the sound of a horse turning in a stall to face the door, not in fear, but in awareness. Outside, the bay gelding in the shade watched the side of the barn where the old horse had gone in and then come out again. The air around his nostrils quivered once, as if catching a scent carried on more than wind. Later in the afternoon, the day grew heavy. Dust hung in the sun that filtered through the high gaps in the metal siding. Pens filled and emptied. The snack stand ran out of coffee. Emma's hand cramped around her pen. Her uncle's voice on the loudspeaker sounded more tired with every lot. The bay gelding was still outside. He had shifted locations slightly, now nearer to an empty pen, but still within sight of the main door. People passed him and stopped noticing him. He had become part of the landscape, like the old tire in the ditch or the leaning fence post. Only Emma still glanced at him every time she stepped out, as if checking that a page in a book had not been turned yet. At some point in the day, a consignment line near the bottom of the list caught her eye. Lot 371. No description, no breed, no age, no color. Just a scribbled note in a tired hand. Will fill later. Later never came. When the office printer spat out the run order, 371 stayed empty. That bothered Emma more than it should have. The sale was messy, but the numbers were usually clean. Empty lines felt like missing teeth. Around the time the light began to shift toward evening, her uncle's voice came over the loudspeaker with a different tone. He announced a special lot, a horse that had arrived with no clear owner information, no proper form filled out, only that one line on a scrap of paper. He knows where he belongs. The description that followed matched the horse in the shade. Bay. One white sock. Gelding. Plain. The hair on Emma's arms lifted. She went outside and found him still there, exactly as if he had been waiting for that moment. His ears flicked when he saw her. There was no hesitation when she slipped a halter over his head and led him toward the alley. Under the bright lights of the ring, he seemed to grow without actually changing size. His coat did not suddenly shine like polished glass. His mane did not magically become perfect, but there was a settled quality in his step that set him apart. He walked in with his head neither high nor low, not proud, not afraid, merely present. The crowd felt it without knowing what they were feeling. Conversations thinned. The usual quick judgments, good neck, bad feet, decent hocks, rough eye, did not land in the same way. The auctioneer started the bid with a modest number barely above the cost of hay for a month. That was his attempt to keep things normal. Short, sharp sentences, familiar rhythm. Nothing special here. The numbers did not explode. They climbed in slow, uneven steps. People who usually did not look twice at a plain bay found themselves raising cards anyway. Some bidders dropped out faster than they expected. Others stayed in longer than they had planned. Lucas wrote the lot number on his pad and then stared at the blank space next to it. His hand hovered, then added a wide, puzzled circle. There was no logic he could see. No obvious reason this particular horse should draw this specific mix of interest. The bidding settled at a figure that was not high enough for drama, but not low enough for indifference. Stuck. Suspended. Then the pledges started. No one planned them. There was no speech. People remembered the old bay from earlier, remembered the way the numbers had shifted, and quietly began to add side amounts. Small sums at first, enough to ease the total for whoever ended up with the halter, enough to say, in a way this barn did not usually allow. That value could come from more than one direction. By the time the hammer dropped, the ledger in the office would show a clean, straight sale. Seller paid in full, barn fee collected, buyer charged a manageable amount that did not match the final call in the ring because others had covered the rest. In the moment, it felt like something else. It felt like watching gravity tilt. The bay gelding left the ring with a middle-aged woman in a blue shirt holding his lead rope. She walked as if both afraid and relieved, as if she had just taken on a weight she wanted and feared at the same time. Emma watched them cross the alley. For a breath, the horse turned his head toward her again. In his dark eye, there was no human story, no clear message. Only a depth that made her think of old roads, worn smooth by many hooves. The rest of the day continued. There were no more reverse moments, no more pledges. The buyer in sunglasses went back to his habitual pattern. The auctioneer found his normal rhythm again. Emma's uncle calmed down, at least on the outside. From the front gate, the sun slipped behind a row of low trees and turned the dust into gold. Only one detail refused to line up like before. When Emma finished her shift and walked out to the lot with her bag over her shoulder, she looked for the bay gelding in the pens. He was gone. She checked all the usual places. The sold pen where horses waited for trailers that would take them to new barns. The back pens where the working stock stood. The dark row where the plant buyer's animals stood heavy and quiet. No one matching him. Her uncle swore he had been consigned properly, that the woman in blue had paid at the office and taken him home. Emma believed the part about the payment. She was less sure about the rest, though she knew that doubt did not make sense. The barn was large, the day had been long, and horses went in and out all the time. On the printed list, Lot 371 now had a number in every column. Age, approximate. Color, bay. Sex, gelding. Sale price, filled in. Buyer number, clear. The blank line had been patched. The feeling remained. Later that week, small stories began to drift back to the barn. Someone heard that the chestnut mare with the crooked blaze had settled well at the rescue and had already carried a teenager through a field without a single spook. Someone else said the old bay had been seen grazing in a small pasture, standing close to a house with a porch light that burned late into the night. Word about the plain bay gelding from Lot 371 was slower, but eventually someone mentioned a photo on a phone. The same horse, standing in front of a weathered barn that did not look like any place near the auction, ears forward, body loose. Emma thought about the day often. She replayed the moment when the bids for the old bay had collapsed downward in a way the rules did not encourage. She remembered the pause when the killer buyer had stopped on the chestnut mare and let the rescue woman take her home. She remembered the strange calm that had entered the barn when the plain bay stepped under the lights. Most of all, she thought about how people had acted when those things happened. No one had turned into a hero. No one had given away a fortune. It had been small decisions. A card raised once more than planned. A nod withheld. A few dollars shared. A willingness for one afternoon to let the idea of worth bend in a direction that did not always follow the coldest math. Over time, the barn did not become a sanctuary. It stayed what it was, a place where money and need met under fluorescent lights. But the day with the horse outside left a thin, permanent crack in the old surface. Now and then, when a tired animal turned one last circle in the ring and the numbers felt wrong, someone in the stands remembered. A small pledge would appear. A buyer would step back. A seller would walk down to the rail and watch more closely. The auctioneer would feel the weight of eyes in a way he could not quite shake. People said the bidding went wrong that day. Emma decided that it had gone true for a moment. As for the horse who had stood outside the auction barn, no one could agree on the details later. Some remembered him with a bigger blaze. Some insisted he had been darker, or lighter, or taller. Records said one thing, memory said another. Only Emma could still feel in her palm the exact texture of his dusty coat under her hand, the quiet heartbeat behind his ribs, and the solid, unmoving presence of him in the strip of shade while the whole noisy machine of the sale spun and stumbled around him. In her mind, he remained where he had started, standing just outside the door, facing the alley where trucks came and went, watching until the numbers inside the barn finally shifted, even for a moment, in a direction that did not quite make sense on paper, but made a different kind of sense somewhere else.